Naval warfare during World War II was shaped by advances in technology, strategy, and tactics. Aircraft carriers were front and center as the dominant combat weapon. Improvements in the uses of sonar and radar made detecting enemy submarines, ships, and planes more effective. And of course, the weapons had become even more destructive than ever. Laying mines in the oceans, seas, and waterways was also an important tool used by the navies of the Allies and the Axis powers during the war. Mines had been used in prior conflicts, including World War I, but their use and effectiveness had increased during the Second World War. According to the Naval Surface Weapons Center, the effectiveness of mines laid by Allied forces was doubled from World War I to World War II, going from 71 mines laid per ship sunk to just 37. Mines are a passive and cost-effective weapon of naval warfare. Offensively, they could be placed across heavily trafficked shipping lanes to sink enemy warships and merchant ships, or blockade enemy ports. Defensively, mines protect vulnerable ports and defend crucial shipping lanes. Strategically, mines could be used by an inferior force against a fleet of superior numbers, by deterring enemy movement and forcing its ships into vulnerable positions. Sea mines can be free-floating, drifting in the current, or moored to an anchor by a chain, floating just underneath the surface. The most common mine used was a contact mine. However, acoustic mines, which detonated upon receiving specific sound waves, and magnetic mines were also commonly used. Opposing navies responded by developing countermeasures, including building and deploying minesweepers, which required money, manpower, and valuable resources. But shipping lanes needed to remain open, and ports and coastlines needed protection in order for much-needed supplies, including food and war material, to arrive. But mines are unable to tell friend from foe. The Rescue of HMS Rockingham, today on Shipwrecks and Sea Dogs. The story of HMS Rockingham begins in 1918. She was laid down on the 27th of August 1918 at Bethlehem Shipbuilding Corporation of Squantum, Massachusetts. Originally built as the USS Swasey for the United States Navy, she was a Clemson-class destroyer armed with 4 4-inch 50 caliber guns, 1 3-inch gun, and 12 21-inch torpedo tubes. At 313.5 feet long, 31 feet wide, her 2 steam turbines powered twin shafts delivering 26,500 horsepower. The ship was named after Lieutenant Charles Swasey, a naval officer from Massachusetts killed during the American Civil War. USS Swasey was commissioned into the U.S. Navy on August 8, 1919, and assigned to the Destroyer Division 31 of the Pacific Fleet in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. She was sent to San Diego, California in 1922, where she was decommissioned and assigned to the Reserve Fleet, where she remained for 17 years. When World War II began with Germany's invasion of Poland in 1939, USS Swasey was recommissioned into the U.S. Navy. The United States remained neutral for the time being, but in September of 1940, it made an agreement with the United Kingdom, an agreement called the Destroyers for Bases Deal. The U.S. agreed to send 50 Caldwell, Wicks, and Clemson-class destroyers, all World War I-era ships, to the Royal Navy, in exchange for land rights to build U.S. military bases on British possessions. USS Swasey was transferred to the UK in November of 1940 and commissioned into the Royal Navy as HMS Rockingham, designated G-58. USS Swasey was removed from the U.S. Naval Vessel Register on January 8, 1941. HMS Rockingham arrived at Devonport on the 22nd of December 1940, and work began to refit her into a convoy escort. Changes included removing the mainmast, shortening the foremast and 3 aft funnels, removing the 3-inch gun and 3 of the 4-inch guns, and adding a British 12-pounder high-angle gun for defense against enemy aircraft. 3 of the triple-mounted torpedo tubes, 9 in total, were also removed in order to store additional depth charges and installation of a hedgehog. This was an anti-submarine weapon that fired a spread of mortars ahead of a ship when attacking an enemy U-boat. The U.S. sonar equipment was retained, but ASDIC recorders, anti-submarine detection, were added. The refitting of Rockingham was completed in February of 1941, and she was assigned to the 8th Escort Group. Convoy escorts provided protection for troop ships and merchant ships carrying supplies while crossing the Atlantic between North America and Europe, where the dangers from German U-boats was very high. Rockingham joined her group in March and assisted in local convoys in the northwest approaches to the British Isles. On March 25th and 26th, Rockingham provided part of the escort for military convoy WS-7 as it made its way out of the River Clyde. During these missions, problems and defects with the ship were uncovered, and HMS Rockingham was recalled to Southampton for repairs and further refitting. The second refit was carried out from May to July of 1941. The forward set of torpedo tubes was removed, and a British triple-mounted gun was installed after the funnels. 20mm Oerlikon anti-aircraft guns were also added for further air defense. Rockingham rejoined the 8th Escort Group in late August. Over the next 2 years, she participated in dozens of convoys, protecting shipping across the Atlantic and western approaches to the UK, serving in both the 8th and 1st Escort Groups. In August of 1943, the 24-year-old vessel was withdrawn from Atlantic service and reassigned as an air target ship. After being sent to a Belfast shipyard, HMS Rockingham was modified again for service in this new capacity. Upon completion in January of 1944, Rockingham was allocated to Rosyth Command on the east coast of Scotland. Beginning in February of 1944, the former U.S. Navy destroyer and Royal Navy convoy escort was used as a target for aircrew training. On the morning of the 27th of September 1944, HMS Rockingham was deployed 30 miles southeast of Aberdeen for aircrew training exercises, under command of Lieutenant Commander John Cecil Cooper. At the same time, HMS Lancaster was escorting convoy EN-40 off the east coast of Scotland and was about 20 miles from Rockingham's position. An armored cruiser, Lancaster was also a former U.S. destroyer brought over in the Destroyers for Bases deal. It began as the USS Phillip, a Wickes-class destroyer built in 1918. At 4:45 a.m., Lancaster's commanding officer, Lieutenant John Ritchie, received an urgent message informing him that Rockingham was damaged by either a torpedo or a mine and needed assistance. Lieutenant Ritchie broke off from the convoy and set course for the damaged ship at its full speed of 26 knots. While en route, Lancaster's crew prepared for a search and rescue operation, including possibly picking up survivors out of the water and towing the disabled ship. When Lancaster arrived at the scene, Lieutenant Ritchie determined Rockingham's position was within an area designated as QZX 604. This was a charted British minefield. Rockingham inadvertently drifted into the minefield and struck a floating contact mine laid by one of its own. The ship's engines and steering had been knocked out. While not in danger of sinking from the damage, she was still in the middle of a minefield and was in danger of striking another mine. Rockingham was anchored, but still drifting at about 2 knots, as the weather was rough, with winds between 30 and 40 miles per hour. But Lieutenant Ritchie was not going to take his ship into a minefield. Lancaster informed Rockingham that she would wait outside the minefield zone until Rockingham could drift clear. The powerless ship slowly and aimlessly drifted. Meanwhile, 10 sailors injured in the explosion were loaded into the ship's boat, in order to be transferred to Lancaster as soon as their ship was clear of the minefield. At 9:17 a.m., Rockingham finally cleared the minefield, and the injured sailors were safely transported to Lancaster. The rest of the crew remained on board HMS Rockingham, as its watertight bulkheads were holding, and there was still no immediate danger of it sinking. The crew of Lancaster readied a tow line, but the weather had worsened. Large swells caused both ships to pitch and roll, and winds had increased to 40 to 50 miles per hour. Attaching a tow line would be significantly difficult. The first attempts resulted in the lines breaking almost immediately. When a stronger and sturdier line was used, it also snapped and came very close to becoming entangled in Lancaster's propeller. It took Lancaster's crew 4 hours to recover the tow line and reattach it to Rockingham, but finally at 2:17 p.m., the line was secured. HMS Lancaster took the helpless ship under tow, and other Royal Navy ships had arrived on scene to assist, including the destroyer HMS Vanity and the transport ships Strephon, Robert Stroud, and Harry Melling. These ships remained close by Rockingham to be available for an immediate evacuation if required. At 3:15 p.m., Rockingham messaged Lancaster, reporting its engine room bulkhead was failing, but that the ship should make it through the night. However, the weather was not going to cooperate. Gale-force winds of 60 to 70 miles per hour whipped the seas into a tempest. About an hour later, a terrible squall produced massive swells, tossing the ships around like toys, and the precarious tow line snapped once again. Sailors from HMS Vanity attempted to recover the tow line, while HMT Harry Melling pulled up adjacent to Rockingham, ready to take on its crew. The pitching and rolling of the ships made it nearly impossible for Rockingham's crew to board, although a small handful successfully jumped across. As night was approaching, the remaining crew on Rockingham were near exhaustion, and darkness would make rescue even more difficult. In a daring maneuver, HMS Vanity managed to position itself alongside Rockingham. In heaving, angry seas, the exhausted crew jumped from their failing ship to safety. Finally, at 8:38 p.m., HMS Rockingham sank, stern first. By morning, the rescued crew were transferred to HMS Lancaster, and then taken to their base in Rosyth. The dangerous and heroic rescue saved all but one of the roughly 150 crew on board HMS Rockingham. Stoker Second Class Ronald William Gant was pronounced missing and presumed dead. The 19-year-old sailor's name is included among thousands of other war dead on the Portsmouth Naval Memorial, overlooking the Solent. The Royal Navy understandably disguised the truth of Rockingham's loss. German ships and submarines still patrolled the North Sea, and the Royal Navy did not wish to disclose the location of one of its mined zones. Instead, reports indicated the ship had been lost as a result of enemy action and while personnel were engaged on important operations in home waters. The approximate location of the wreck of HMS Rockingham is known, about 30 miles southeast of Aberdeen, but the wreck itself has not been discovered. Undetected mines were a constant danger, and were not only a physical threat, but a psychological threat. Mines altered strategies, diverted ships, and changed attack plans. The mere threat of mines was unnerving, as they lay in quiet silence, unseen and undetected. Despite the extensive use of minesweepers, about 550 ships were lost worldwide during the war, representing about 1.5 million tons of shipping. Only torpedoes resulted in more shipping losses. That's going to do it for the rescue of HMS Rockingham. Thank you to listener Ben T for suggesting this story. If you have an episode suggestion, please send them to me using the contact form at shipwrecksandseadogs.com or email me at rich@shipwrecksandseadogs.com. Shipwrecks and Sea Dogs is written, edited, and produced by me, Rich Napolitano. Original theme music is by Sean Siegfried. For ad-free listening, please subscribe at patreon.com/shipwreckspod, now with 3 tiers to choose from, starting at just $5 a month. All tiers get ad-free episodes and bonus episodes with different perks for joining. Go to patreon.com/shipwreckspod to subscribe. You can also join the Officers Club now directly through Apple Podcasts for just $4.99 a month. Simply find Shipwrecks and Sea Dogs on Apple Podcasts and click the banner to subscribe. Last but not least, please be sure to rate and review Shipwrecks and Sea Dogs on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please join me again next time. And as always, don't forget to wear your life jackets.